This is sort of like the suitcase talk. The moment you start talking, everybody sort of starts click, 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 and heading for the back. So I'll just say a couple of things. I won't be very long because I think you've had a long and very productive couple of days. So I was just going to reflect a little on, I guess, the last 4 years since we had the Beyond the PDF in San Diego, which was sort of one of a number of events that kicked this whole thing off. And I thought I'd just get a show of hands. Who was actually at the original one 4 years ago? So there's a few people, and also there's obviously a lot of new people, and I think that is really a testament to the success of this. And I would thank all of the folks that have been involved in Force 11 over the years who really made this thing happen. You know, it's really is a fine accomplishment. You should all be very proud. So we were all standing in front of the bear in San Diego. That's, if you haven't seen the bear, that's the bear. So I decided to sort of crowdsource a little. As Stephanie or anyone else would tell you, I don't actually do anything. I never have now. Jenny and others would tell you the same thing. I just sort of delegate everything to other people. So I tried to sort of crowdsource what had happened in the last 4 years. And I have to say this is a very biased little survey because it went out to the Force 11 group, and clearly you all feed off each other and you all have the same kind of views. So I think there's a couple of telling comments in it at the end, but I think most part it's sort of what you'd expect. So I asked the question, actually, what are the 4 highest ranking innovation in the past 4 years, and asked you to classify those. So it turns out that policy was the thing you thought most had an impact in the last 4 years. Well, that makes me feel good because that was kind of why I left UCSD to try and do some of these things, because I really believe that as much as all the things you were doing are incredibly valuable, I think there needs to be both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And policy, to me, is something that really needs to go, and I'll say a bit more about this, hand in hand. But obviously software and other aspects, and there's some obviously overlap in this. But if you start looking down the questions, or the rankings, what you see is you start to see more of a balance. So this is the second most important, the third and the fourth. And by the time you get down to the 4th level, policy obviously has become less important, but software is more important. So what did you have to say about the things that had, you know, given these broad classifications, what did you have to say about what happened in the last 4 years? So let's just look at each of them. So let's say policy. So I kind of, based on the comments you made, and I'm being cheap, I didn't actually have a subscription to SurveyMonkey, so I basically did this all by hand. So I couldn't really extract very well. But I think I've tried to capture, and these are sort of in order, it's approximate. But funder mandates, I think, was the thing that you thought most. I think data sharing policies, for example, journals requiring data accessibility was clearly something that was really important. The work that you've done here yourselves on the data declaration principles, clearly very important. And then the recent announcement from the Gates Foundation about the requirements that, in fact, data has to be made available at the time of publication, and that all publications have to be open access immediately. This is actually something that's also under consideration in other places. Peer review, you know, these things have been well said, but you know, clearly different types of peer review. You could argue whether they're policy or other, but in any case, they appeared. And then we've heard a lot about, we heard GitHub mentioned many times. So these are just, again, in order, things that you all know that appeared as important contributions in the last 4 years. I think methodology, the idea of crowdfunding, pre-publication circles, people mentioned particular tools, or particular sort of portals like OpenWorm, and now that was crowdfunding with 60 developers and so on. And also software carpentry. We actually, I'll just give a little plug to the NIH and software carpentry. We just had our first software carpentry workshop at NIH, and there'll be, I'm sure, lots more because it sold out literally in minutes. So I think it's encouraging that we're, even the funders are doing some of this now internally, which is good. And then standards, the only thing that really came up, so I don't know what to say about that, but certainly ORCID, which obviously is important, but that was the only sort of standard that actually rose to the surface. And then Figshare, obviously fantastic, Wikidata, Dryad, Twitter, blogs, the sort of things that you talked about a lot as things that you thought were important. So, and then I guess other kinds of things, altmetrics, social reference management, data science as a profession, research expertise through tools like Vivo and other profiling tools, the Research Identification Initiative. The only person who actually got Ioannidis was the only actual person who got a real call out, except for me. Of course, people were trying to crawl up, I guess. But anyway, and then mega journals as development. So these are just things, you're all aware of them, but this is the sort of things that bubbled up in. And I should say, I think there was about 40, 50 responses to this from this kind of audience. But then there was something like this, and I have to say that after all this time, I still think this resonates to a great deal of truth, and it worries me a lot. Sorry, but I can't think of one that has made an impact in my life. I still consume scientific knowledge via PDF, while occasionally reading something in HTML. You know, I think that, to me, is a problem. I mean, that the impact that we're having as a group, or you are having, I can't say we anymore, you are having as a group, I think there needs to be somehow far more outreach and into the community, because there are many things you're doing, but it's not necessarily having the kind of impact in the broader community. And I have to say, I think it's true. When I talk to colleagues from my old department, or it's you know, they're aware of some of these things, and some of them are being used, but for the most part, I think, you know, I don't think the full value of what you're doing is being appreciated by the community. And how we go about that, I think, is something that you as a community, again, these things, and I'll say a little more about this in a second, but is, you know, I think something that needs to be done together. So I'm going to sort of give you a little personal view of summarizing that in my own terms. I think a strength of what you've done so far as a community is really the breadth. We talked a little about that. Of course, it could be broader, but really that you do have a real community, and I think you should be very proud of that. I've seen other communities emerge, and it's interesting, and I've been thinking about ways as funders now how we can stimulate the development of communities. And it's interesting, they have a whole dynamic of their own, but they also have some similarities, and I won't go into that, so it's not really a focus here, but you know, I think we need to be thinking about how to help those along more. I certainly think funder mandates in terms of data sharing will have really had a big effect, and you said that yourself. And then I think there's just a big focus on data. You know, I'm part of an initiative, a Big Data Knowledge Program at the NIH, and that's just one of them. I mean, there's clearly lots of different kinds of data initiatives going on. So I think that's bringing much more focus. So how do you actually use that focus with what you're doing to really sort of merge things together? So those are the pluses. I don't think, I encourage you to push back, because these are my personal views, and you may not like some of the minuses. I'm frankly not personally impressed with what's been done with respect to the open access corpus. I know that there's a number of things that people have talked about here, I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday, that really relate to that. But when I think about how that's impacted your average researcher, I still think we're completely undervaluing what's happened here. Tools to actually really provide knowledge enhancement and actually use the corpus in a really effective way. It's not just about text mining, but I don't really see enough of that. And if you feel differently, then please push back. I think also in some ways, and again, this is, you know, a gross statement, but open access has been effective, particularly in countries which don't have necessary access. But when you think about it, the impact that it's had on a typical institution in Europe or in the US or elsewhere has not been, I think, what we would like to be. And I was actually surprised to know that when I was at the OPSCA meeting in Paris earlier in the year, that in fact that open access has essentially had no economic impact on publishing whatsoever, at least along traditional publishing models, as far as I could gather. I think the idea of things happening bottom up and top down, so in other words, funders and other stakeholders doing things that impact the community that is coming from the bottom up, I don't think we've been quite synergistic enough yet. And I think that was partly the idea of the funders session, to think about how we might do better at that. And then the global community is not united, and I'm a little, this is a little biased. So HEROES is a group of the health information research, health institutions, research organisations that is really about organisations like Wellcome, like NIH, that exist within the G8. So I've been talking as part of my role, so this is a little biomedical, I'm sorry, but when you talk to these folks in these different countries, we're certainly not united in the way we think about open access or the way we think about e-scholarship. And I think that we could do a lot more in that regard. Okay, so what's the way forward? That's all very miserable, I suppose. So the way forward, from my point of view, is something we're sort of doing internally, but I think it applies quite generally. So it's kind of like a three-legged stool to move forward. It's about community, which we heard a lot about. It's about policy, which you've heard a fair bit about, and infrastructure that kept being emphasised. I think those synergistically all have to move forward in lockstep together. And you know, that leads to issues and possibilities for sustainability, collaboration, all sorts of things that sit at that intersection. But that's sort of, you know, the way that we have to move forward, in my opinion. And certainly, you know, you're representative of the community. There are policy decisions that are going on. Just to give you one example, we're looking right now at the notion of data citation. So the idea that the NIH would legitimise, this is just again from our own agency point of view, would legitimise data citation so that that would actually be encouraged. So you would be encouraged in grant applications, in workshop reports, or whatever else, to actually include data citation and make it part of the citation network. And so, you know, it's just essentially legitimising something that's not there currently. So that would be an example of policies, and lots of other things going on. So that's sort of where I see things. And then what about going forward? Well, I would say that there's, and again, I'm about to crowdsource you. Here's your chance. So I think we're at this sort of unique opportunity point that doesn't come along very often. And again, I'm sorry, it's a little biomedical, but there's no doubt that if something came from this, it would certainly permeate across other disciplines as well. But both the EBI and the National Library of Medicine in the US and EBI here in Europe are soon to assume new leadership. And I think that provides an opportunity to actually do some things differently. So as an example, Don Lindberg has been the head of the National Library of Medicine since, I think, 1980 something. And he's retiring in March. And there's now a committee being formed that reports to the director, working group, that reports to the NIH director, which has been charged with looking at what, making some initial recommendations for what the institution of the future should look like. Neither David Littman, who's the head of NCBI, or I are on that committee, and we're certainly going to be reporting into that committee. So I think this is an opportunity, and I'll tell you why I think it's an opportunity. But what I'd really like is I'd like you to tell me why you think it's an opportunity for the things that you do. So here's why I think it's an opportunity, and it's very much in keeping with a number of the themes of the things that we've heard. So if you put all this together, the library effectively, and I'm just, it's true of EBI as well, but I'm just sticking with the one that I know the best, that really it is, over the years, it has supported a community, it has an infrastructure, and it's an infrastructure in biomedicine that's used very, very extensively. There's nothing else like it around. And it also sets policies and standards and the like. So there's this kind of institution that exists already. So if we're going to reinvent that institution, what should it look like in the future? I would argue what we have right now is not what we want for the future. So what should this look like? What should our future objectives be? So what I would say we have right now, and this is of no criticism, it's just part of the evolution, is, it doesn't matter, you could say the same about EBI or you could say the same about NLM, is you've got a series of silos of data with some semblance of interoperability between them, so-called cylinders of excellence. And then you've got the literature, which sits there either in PubMed Central or in PubMed, which has some level of connection. But really, you know, is that the model of the future? And I would argue that that is by no means the model of the future. It's much more along the lines of the things that we've been hearing about. So, you know, the library is a place where you can curate, catalogue, preserve, and disseminate everything associated with the digital research lifecycle. That's what we've been hearing about here in a number of instances. So I can imagine that being the model of the future. But what does that say? It means, frankly, it means that the notion of between a publisher and some entity that maintains data and other types of content goes away. It's a single entity, and it doesn't actually have to exist as one physical or even one virtual thing. It could be a worldwide library. It could be a virtual connected, interoperable kind of environment. I mean, obviously this is not going to happen, something like this would not happen overnight. This is something that would take years and years, but I think it's something that we need to move towards. And the fact you've been talking about it already effectively is, and now that there's actually an institution that might be in a position to at least start thinking about it, I think is really exciting. Libraries also, of course, keep physical artifacts, typically books and things, but there's no reason why they couldn't keep other kinds of physical artifacts that have to do with the scientific research life cycle. You know, so it's something completely different than what we have now. But to me, it's something that makes a lot of sense. So then, of course, publishing becomes something different altogether. It really involves just changing the access control on different parts of the research life cycle and making them accessible and reviewable at appropriate times. So, you know, that's, to me, a sort of model that I see personally. And of course, we need to have referencing for all of these things. There needs to be temporal order. We need languages for looking at them and manipulating them. But all of that's sort of beginning to happen or is happening already. And then collections, you know, you make your own collections. You have formal collections, which are sort of what databases were or are. But you can then, on the fly, create all sorts of other kinds of collections. I mean, this is happening in a small way already, but it could actually happen on a much larger. And then those, of course, could be either dynamic and disappear at the end of a session, or they could be made persistent. It really is a reflection of the way we do research right now. I think the way we do research is really now not in step with the way we have all these resources. So we use these resources where we go to the literature, where we go to a database. When we're only accessing a few data types, then the fact that we had different silos of excellence that had different access modes and had all these other sorts of things made some sense. But now, I think in a mode where research tends to be much more sort of translational, where you're accessing a whole variety of different things, it seems to me to make more sense to actually have a much more generic and open mechanism, where many people can contribute to. And that's somewhat different. I won't speak about the EBI, but that's certainly something different than what happens at the National Library of Medicine right now. That is not an open system. It's a great system, but it's not an open system. If David Littman was here, he'd kill me. But he's not. He may be listening. I actually have written this up and I've sent it to him. So, but I think the signs of this kind of change, institutional repositories run by libraries, academic presses, which are not traditional academic presses, but are sort of maintaining more of the research life cycle, portals, workflow systems, all of this. And then I think there's resistance to it as well. I think publishers have sort of resisted it en masse by punting off and sort of having software and data put somewhere else and doing other things. You can kill me later. I think the reward structure, you talked a lot about this, that has to be different in this kind of model. But, you know, you have to take steps to get there. And I think, again, I think the funding organisations can do a lot to influence the reward system. And I could tell you about some things we're piloting right now if there was time. And then there needs to be, as you pointed out, more funding opportunities. So I think it'd be interesting to see what evolves. What I'd really like to, I'm writing up this, I've been asked to write a report to this committee. So I'm asking you to give me your input for what you want to see in this library of the future. And I will of course credit you. But if you have that much interest and you feel passionate enough about this, send me along ideas, and I will respond. And it'll be certainly much, much better than what it will be if I just do it myself. So thanks very much. If I'm allowed to, yes.
Are there a couple of questions for Phil? Let me pass this microphone straight back.
Yeah, I will.
So how do you see the library? The library of the future sort of weaving into your vision for the commons?
So I didn't want to mention the commons because I was trying to keep this as generic as possible. Clearly I see, for people who don't know, we're working on the NIH, and it's not an NIH thing, it's actually a completely open thing, but it's really a shared space with research object identification, growing sets of metadata in an open environment, cloud, public-private cloud-based, institutionally based, and I could go on about that, but it's really just think of it as a shared environment. George, who's here, could tell you a lot about it. He's been working a lot on this. Has a new business model for funding and all the rest of it. But yes, I think David Littman and I talk a lot about this. So we've talked about schemes for the commons that apply just as readily to this. So you can imagine, just a situation in this research life cycle that's now going, and I don't think we should call it the library. It's something else. I don't know what it is, but it's something else. But the stuff that we've talked about as we tromp around the NIH campus is the idea that you drag something into the commons. You drag, some piece of research that you've done. Let's just call it, you've generated let's just say a file. You've generated a file. That file type can be identified. That can be validated to some level against the standard that's sitting in this shared space. That generates a metadata file that essentially speaks to the level of authentication of that information, at least against that standard. And then that's available in this space as well. And you can choose to keep it to yourself as you develop it, or you can choose to share it. In which case, so that's how we see the commons, and I see that as being part of this kind of enterprise as well. So in my distorted mind, these things are quite closely related.
Can we pass on, let's say, Peter? How are you doing?
Peter Murray Russ. So Phil, you said you were going to answer my question in your talk, and
you remember?
I remember, yes. So, coming on to this question of commons, the commons run for the public good is great, but what we're seeing at the moment is strong attempts to enclose the digital commons and put them into private ownership. This happened in this country in the 18th century, and it totally changed, the landscape. In Scotland, people were evicted and livelihoods were lost and so on. And we're moving into that unless we stop it. So maybe your commons, which obviously I applaud, will actually be so successful that the rest won't happen. But at the moment, I'm going to quote from the Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge, not just me. He said, if you are worried about Elsevier owning open access, these are his words, not mine, then wait till you see what they're doing with open data. Elsevier wants to control data in universities. That's what the Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge said. And it will happen because libraries do not build. Libraries buy subscriptions to third-party tools.
So, okay, I'll try and answer your question. First of all, I'm sorry, but I can only give you somewhat of a US-centric view because that's where I'm working right now. But, with my accent, I can apologise for that and get away with it. So, you know, we now have federal mandates. I go to the White House to talk about data sharing. There is a mandate across the whole federal government to be as open as possible. I know that sounds a bit strange when we have the NSA, but in terms of the federal agencies within the Health and Human Services, which includes the NIH, across NSF and other agencies, NOAA and Atmospheric and Oceanographic, NASA and so on and so on, there really is seriousness about doing this. And you know, there are requirements to do it. I mean, unfortunately, you know, but you know, it's easy to say. So this came down as what's called the Holdren Memo. It came as a memo, effectively from the President of the United States, that says this data is to be shared, and it's to be shared openly and freely. So in federal terms, that's a so-called unfunded mandate, because that's sort of the why we're doing this, but there's no how.
Sure.
So the common, you know, and I worry about this a lot in my role. How do you sustain something like this? We have enough trouble sustaining the data resources we have. If it was suddenly required to put even more out there, how are we going to do that? So I'm looking, you know, the Commons from my point of view is a scheme to do that. But I think at least for those kinds of data that are generated on, in our case, NIH grants, first of all, it's a requirement. And secondly, we're going to start checking much better than we do now. So this is one of Daniel's thoughts. It's a very good one, and it's taken hold, is the idea, so we have data sharing plans. NSF has data sharing plans, and what agencies have data sharing plans. Right now, frankly, they don't mean very much, okay? Because reviewers don't really look at them seriously. So the idea is, well, first of all, it's ironic, and this is Daniel's comment, that those data sharing plans are not machine readable. So the idea is you make them machine readable, you can immediately say that PIX says on day Y they're going to put this data in repository Z. Then, so that's one end of the research life cycle. If it's all in this new library, then you're in good shape already. But at the other end of the research life cycle, you have some form of data object out there. That data object now needs to have the grant number associated with it as part of its metadata. And you can immediately check, as if on day, whatever I said it was, X, that this actually has happened. And if it doesn't, then you can take some action. So I think there's great seriousness about at least doing that. So I would say that's counter to the development that you're talking about. And I'm actually very confident that at least in that environment, that this is what it's going to be like.
Thanks very much, Phil.